always tried to figure out what's the prescriptive, I don't know, threshold of ego. Like, well, where does ego have to stop, you know, before it becomes unhealthy? Because just like you said, like a big ego, it technically is good if it's quote unquote healthy.
Yes.
But then I've always figured out, okay, so what's the diagram? What's the thing? You know,
and not only that, why it's difficult for you to figure out where that is, because it's different for different situations.
Right. But that's a good little description right there, where it's like the perceived versus the reality or whatever, like kind of a thing. Like my
cloud self-perception.
Yeah. So if it's in line with like reality with the team, that means you got to be really in touch, you know? Then it's going to be a healthy ego no matter how big. You see what I'm saying? If you're getting things done and you have high expectations for yourself and for others, you know, that whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like healthy if it's in line with the reality of it.
I think you just nailed it. If it's in line with reality, it's fine.
Yeah.
When it's out of line with reality, or at least, look, it doesn't have to mirror reality, but it has to reflect reality.
Right.
That's the difference. Because if I'm an MMA fighter and I'm going to fight, you know, John Jones, like, okay, I need to be humble when I'm training to fight John Jones, and then when I'm getting in the ring, I gotta be like, all right, dude, like, this is John Jones. I got a plan.
Yeah.
Hey, he might be the greatest ever, but I got a chance. If I can connect with this, if I can get that look, you know, I got to get some confidence going.
Oh yeah, fully.
It's not closely, you know, at that point in an MMA fight against John Jones, it's not very closely related to reality. I didn't pick a good example.
But the approach,
a better
is still
example
sound,
would be, let's not say me, but let's say an actual MMA fighter that's going up against the champ. Right? They have a decent chance of beating them. They could pull it off. Like, all these things are good. And they have to be confident. What they can't be is like, there's no way I can win this.
Right.
That would be a lack of ego, and that would cause them to have no chance of winning.
Or there's no way I can lose this as well. If they really believe that, you know, it's like...
Which we've seen that before in MMA, where guys put their hands down or whatever, they joking around, crack.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they get caught, they get knocked out.
Yeah.
So yes, the ego, and this ties into something I've been discussing a decent amount lately, and that is just the self-awareness of knowing who you are. You know, Jimmy May, when he was on the podcast, he was talking about the fact that when people are going through buds, depending on how they view themselves and what the delta is between how someone views themselves and how the class views them, the bigger the delta, the less chance they have of making it through. So with ego, the further your ego gets away from reality, the worse situation you're going to be in.
Yeah, so it's like a form of inflation. So it's like the reality of your worth or whatever is the healthy ego zone. Any kind of inflation from there is like the delta. Yeah,
and you have to. It's weird because there's certain moments where you have to ego up. This is a interrogation term, right? Like when I say, dude, you know, when I'm interrogating you and I say, hey, you being in charge of all these troops, you must know exactly where they're going to attack. And you go, you're damn right I do. And then you tell me. Or I ego down, which is like, you don't even know what's happening with your own troops. And you go, yes, I do. And you tell me where they are.
Yeah.
But you have to do that with your ego in certain situations. Like when you're walking into the cage, or you're walking onto the battlefield, or you're walking into the meeting to present something, you got to ego up a little bit.
Yeah.
But when you're preparing for the meeting, when you're preparing for the fight, when you're preparing for the battlefield, you got to ego down a little bit.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of make some adjustments.
Perfect addition to the diagram, because I think that's still part of the healthy ego. It can expand as needed, because not too much, otherwise you go into inflation, and it can contract as needed, you know,
but not too much.
Otherwise, you go into like
deflation,
feebleness. Yeah. So, and like your kind of like your muscles, right? Sometimes you get that pump. You look in the mirror, you see that pump, you're like, but that's really your body. That's really your arms or shoulder, whatever you're looking at. You see what I'm saying? It's not always going to be like that, but under certain circumstances, that's really you, homie. You see what I'm saying? And then sometimes you might feel a little bit shriveled or whatever when you're dehydrated, whatever, and that's you too.
Yeah, good point. But if you don't see yourself realistically in that mirror, and you start thinking that you're huge and you're entering a bodybuilding contest when you're not there, or the other end of the spectrum is you don't think you're not seeing how jacked you really are, and now you're freaking going on crazy Trenbolone and whatever other steroids you're going to go on to, and you have body dysmorphia.
Dysmorphia, yeah.
So, yes.
So some people might have ego dysmorphia kind of a scenario. See what I'm saying?
That's it, man.
Yeah.